I need somebody help, not just anybody help. You know I need someone help. When I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. But now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and opened up the doors. Help me if you can, I'm feeling down, and I do appreciate you being around. Help me get my feet back on the ground. Won't you please, please help me?
This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Raw Deal, right here on Revolution Radio Studio B Live this 4th day of April, 2025. Be joined shortly by Brian Davidson, my co-host, and I'm delighted to have a special guest, Paul DeLawrence, who's going to talk about Lahaina, Paradise, and what else is going on with directed energy weapons. I'm sure this will be of great interest to everyone here. Very troubling stuff. Meanwhile, with regard to Iran, we're on a path to destruction. The American Conservative has reported. This is a responsible website talking about obvious problems we confront here as Bibi seeks to induce America to fight another war for Israel. Donald Trump rode into office twice now on a wave of promises to upend the Washington consensus, to drain the swamp of its self-serving mandarins and to keep America out of endless wars. His base cheered when he skewered the neoconservative architects of Iran and Afghanistan, wars that bled our treasury and, most importantly, many of our sons, for little more than bragging rights in Beltway and Tel Aviv salons. Yet here we are in the early days of his second term, with whispers growing louder from the usual suspects, advisors and hangers-on nudging him toward a strike on Iran, peddling the old lie, it'll be quick, clean, and simple. History, that stern teacher we keep ignoring, tells us otherwise. Yet the hawks in the Trump admin appear to be anxious to wreck another country, which would join the long recurring tragedy of U.S.-caused failed countries in the Middle East. Iran, of course, is a very substantial nation. It's not going to be a pushover. It's prepared. Its president even said of Trump, do whatever the hell you're going to do because we're ready for it. Here we have Colonel Macgregor.
I don't see much evidence for action. And you're talking essentially about London, Paris, and Berlin. And as you know, in Berlin, they had to vote to change a provision in the basic law so that they could exceed their budgetary limits. Frankly, it's very hard to believe. Military power takes time to develop and grow.
Just talking about Ukraine.
Usually, on average, it's about 10 years. And so whatever you invest today, you will begin to see an impact, provided the organization changes and adapts to the new technology, in about 5 years. But you won't have the full impact militarily on a battlefield for perhaps another 5. So I'm a little skeptical. Plus, you've got to look at the financial realities. Britain's about to go under financially. France isn't far behind. The Germans are in a lot of trouble. It's hard to take any of it seriously, frankly.
But how do you explain the bellicosity of Prime Minister Starmer? Was nothing to back up his bellicose words with President Macron and even von der Leyen. How do you explain all of their condemnations and warning of fears of Russia?
I think we're in a position right now where the globalist ruling class, primarily in Western, but not exclusively Western Europe, is clinging tenaciously to power. We just saw Marie Le Pen, I think, judged unfairly and then ridiculously placed in prison. I suspect that France is within weeks of a tremendous revolution. I don't see how they get through the summer without it. This kind of behavior is not evidence for strength, it's evidence for weakness and fear. They're going to go down fighting as far as they're concerned. The initial strategy was to try and drag us into the war that we didn't want to fight in Eastern Europe. That failed miserably, and so the next stage was either we stand up, join hands, and try to march into war together, or we'll simply be removed from power and it's over. And I think they're sensing that it's over. So I don't take these things very seriously at all. Starmer, good Lord, I'm surprised that the English population hasn't at least risen up and done away with him. That may yet happen. The situation in the West is very, very, very fragile.
Let me just add more. Plus, we have New York Times publishing an article to prepare the American people for defeat in Ukraine. It's not going to work well. Here we have antiwar.com. Trump is preparing to bomb Iran with Israel. The U.S. and Israel are currently planning to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities, an attack that could happen in a few weeks' time, Daily Mail columnist Dan Hodges reported Wednesday. Hodges wrote the report while in Tel Aviv, citing Israeli political, diplomatic, and military sources. He said the purpose of the strike would be to eradicate the threat posed by Iran's nuclear weapons program, though there's no evidence that Tehran has a nuclear weapons program, a fact recently confirmed by U.S. intelligence agencies. Remember, Tulsi went to Congress and said it's the consensus of the U.S. intel community, which includes the CIA, Iran does not possess and is not seeking to possess nuclear weapons. So what the hell is going on here? This is a fulfillment of Bibi Netanyahu's wet dream that it can induce the United States to attack Iran, where for some 30 years he's been threatening, warning us that Iran was only months away from a nuclear weapons program that it does not possess and has never sought to develop. Scott Ritter has also spoken about these issues.
It would have to have mechanisms in place that denied Iran the ability to rapidly break out and produce nuclear weapons. I do think there's a formula there. Everybody is familiar with the Iranian program, and everybody understands the capabilities of the Iranian program. I think Russia is a good pick for proxy negotiator because Russia has just signed a strategic framework agreement with Iran, where there is a nuclear component. Russia will be building nuclear power plants inside Ukraine, and Russia could be in a position to guarantee Ukraine sufficient uranium fuel so that Iran would be able to say, well, then we don't need this excess enrichment capacity. Because right now, the Iranian program is just full of excesses. It's too big to simply be a program for the limited amount of fuel that they need to be manufacturing. If I think that you could reach an agreement as Iran acquires new reactors, Iran would be able to scale up its enrichment. I mean, that could be one approach, but you don't allow Iran to front load the enrichment so that they have a tremendous amount of unused enrichment capacity that can only be justified if Iran was seeking to rapidly break out. I just think that there's an agreement to be had technically, whether or not there's the political will on the part of Iran, and to be frank, on the part of the United States to accept this is another question altogether.
Watch this before drinking plant-based milks.
Oat milk latte.
Protein
So
notes
we have-
almost exactly like gluten. You know,
So we have the prospect that Iran, after Trump pulled out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, seeking to cover itself by having the capacity, if it were to so desire, but which it does not at present pursue, to develop nuclear weapons, but honestly, it's really contradictory to the Supreme Leader's preparation. The Yemenis, meanwhile, have been launching fresh attacks on a U.S. aircraft carrier. This is pretty amazing stuff, how the Houthis have continued to persist even when they're under attack and assault by the United States. They are the most robust and, in my opinion, admirable force attempting to bring a justice to Israel, opposing the aggression. They're the only Muslim state that has declared war on Israel, and everything they're doing is consistent with their declaration of war. And the United States is not. Even the UN has acknowledged that the Iranian efforts are consistent with the laws of war. Houthi military spokesman says the attack was in response to U.S. aggression on Yemen. The Yemeni rebel Houthi group said early Wednesday it had targeted the USS Harry Truman and its escorting warships in the northern Red Sea. In a televised speech, the group's military spokesman, Yahya Saree, said the attack was in response to the U.S. aggression on Yemen. Now, it was a third attack in the last 24 hours using missiles and drones. This appears to me to be completely inconsistent with the laws of war. That while the UN has certified the Houthis' attacks on Israel and its shipping are all in accordance with the UN Charter, these actions by the United States in attacking the Houthis are not. These are war crimes, crimes against humanity. I find them despicable. Brian, I'm delighted you're here. We've been reviewing some of the evidence that the U.S. is about to attack Iran, and that it's a very bad idea, in my opinion, that the U.S. should contemplate. But where, with the accumulation of forces in Diego Garcia, the Iranians are contemplating a preemptive strike, which is permissible under international law and the UN Charter if a nation confronts an imminent attack. And given the buildup of forces at Diego Garcia and the declarations made by Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State, I think there's no doubt Iran confronts an imminent strike. What are your thoughts on the pros and cons of a preemptive attack in response, where Diego Garcia, because it's isolated in the Indian Ocean, is a perfect target with virtually no collateral damage because there are no civilian buildings, structures, hospitals, schools, and so forth that would be affected? Your thoughts, Brian?
Well, the best way to win a war is to strike before your opponent has the opportunity to prepare for the strike. You don't want to come in and be responding after they've already taken out a significant part of your infrastructure. And we've been telegraphing that we're going to attack Iran for quite a while. It goes back, I don't know. I think it was around 2 years ago, all the buzz began to pick back up under Biden. And it looks like Trump has just simply picked up the same policies that Biden had related to the continued aggression over there. So it's going to get ugly. There's going to be a lot of troops involved if there is a war over there, but there's going to be a lot of missiles involved. And it looks like right now China is giving Yemen their missiles, or selling Yemen their missiles, because Yemen obviously couldn't produce a missile that would be good enough to fly from Yemen to Jerusalem, and which they have launched a few of them. And so with China being brought into it, being the weapons supplier, there's going to be a lot of complications with this particular war. But one thing I know is that the globalist architecture cannot really be installed in efficiently while Iran, Russia, China are all holdouts against the globalist initiative. So I think it's all part of a longer-term plan. And I think that we're going to, under Trump, it looks like he's just simply George Bush in a red hat. I think he's just going to continue with those warmonger policies. I don't really understand why he did it this time, why he's not continuing with the same policies he had in his first term. But this one, it looks like he has joined up with the warmongers and is going to continue to do that. Might be a function of the economy. Might be that the economy or the lobbyists or the partners in the military infrastructure need to have that war. And obviously there's a lot of political pressure to do it for Israel because we do everything that they say they want.
Paul, I'm so pleased to have you here. Would you like to comment on what we're discussing about Ukraine on the one hand and Iran on the other?
Well, it's very shocking and very disappointing to see this new administration take this stance. And again, when I see the type of battles we're facing, not only with this, but also more on a global level, also with all these catastrophes happening that are somewhat around weather and other issues, again, it just raises a lot of concern about what's happening right now.
Yes, indeed it does. Meanwhile, we have some sort of agreement about minerals with Ukraine, but it includes deposits in the Donbass and Crimea, which Russia, of course, controls. They're not going to go along with this. That's quite bizarre. French publication Le Point claims the widely discussed agreement between Ukraine and the United States on mineral resources includes a clause on the extraction of resources in Russian territories, in Donbass and Crimea. It's reported this addition is included in the new version of the document and assumes the use by the parties of deposits in the Black Sea and regions of the Russian Federation. The document, dated March 23rd, consists of 18 chapters and describes the conditions for distributing revenues from the extraction of minerals in the specified territory. Le Point reports the draft document looks more like a regular commercial contract than an intergovernmental agreement. The publication rightly notes that such an agreement would entail serious political consequences given the controversial status of the regions for the West. It's worth recalling the Kremlin and Russian foreign minister have repeatedly emphasized the irreversibility of constitutional changes and the inalienability of Crimea, Donbass, and Novorossiya. Therefore, it's absolutely impossible to implement the amendment to the Trump deal introduced by the Ukrainian side without provoking Russia. Brian, this is bizarre. Your thoughts?
A couple of days ago, about a week ago, Putin came out and announced that they were going to expand their naval capabilities from the military perspective with more nuclear submarines. And so it looks like Putin's finally beginning to realize, and it's possible he will. He's been playing kitty cat pretty much in this whole Ukraine thing for quite a while, but it appears that he's going to get serious at this particular point in time, and largely because Trump has basically telegraphed that his move is to not support European troops in Ukraine, meaning if Europe decides to send troops to Ukraine on their own, that would be France and England. If they decide to send troops on their own, Trump has basically told Putin, you have the right to destroy them. We're not going to intervene. So it doesn't surprise me that this is continuing to expand at the pace it is.
Paul, your thoughts?
Really, I have no other comments. I think that your discussion is spot on right now.
Well, it's pretty damn disturbing that Trump keeps moving forward. It's very clear how much he keeps profits making money in the forefront. I'm fascinated by that. We have more going on. Israel now publicly bragging it has power over U.S. speech. Wanted war criminal and killer Benjamin Netanyahu seen here boasting how he controls the Trump administration. This is right on Twitter, now X. Let's listen.
These ignorant demonstrators. Who are they demonstrating for? For these murderers, these rapists, these mass killers. This is a reflection of a deep rot that has pervaded the intellectual hub of free societies. And this vilification of Israel, the Jewish people, and Western values has been propagated by a systemic alliance between the ultra-progressive left and radical Islam. It must be resolutely fought by civilized societies to safeguard their future. This is why we must all commend President Trump's decisive actions against anti-Semitism, and we must pressure other governments to do the same.
A government can do in 2 months more than any organization can do in its lifetime. And so when we talk about the importance of a bipartisan fight against anti-Semitism, which of course I endorse, and I, as my predecessor said, I condemn anti-Semitism on the right and on the left. I'm an equal opportunity condemner of anti-Semitism.
You're alluding to Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, none of them are any good on the right. On the left, I don't like any of these anti-Semites, and I'm not shy about it. But the government, the United States government, or the government of France, or the government of any other country, has the power to rein in anti-Semitism in a much more effective way. And you know, people say, well, you know, the governments are not in the business of changing the way people think. That's true, but you know, to my thinking, most people who are, you know, anti-Semites, most of these people running around, we're not going to win their hearts and minds because they don't have hearts and they don't have minds. So, you know, how are we going to, there's no reason to think we're ever going to convince them, but we can deport them, we can put them in jail, we can make their lives miserable, we can cut off their funding, and that's what the Trump administration is doing for the first time.
Absolutely disgusting, because of course he's trading on an ambiguity in the meaning of the word anti-Semitism. Historically, anti-Semitism has been discriminating against an individual, discounting their opinions or values because they're Jewish, because of their ethnic legacy. But that's not what he's talking about. There's now been an expanded definition of anti-Semitism to include any criticism of Israel on any grounds whatsoever, including protesting against genocide, than which nothing could be more appropriate. And for the Trump admin to be cracking down on student protesting genocide on the grounds it's anti-Semitism is a linguistic abomination and a legal atrocity. Brian, your thoughts?
Well, obviously, Israel doesn't want its crimes on the Gaza Strip to be denounced, particularly the crimes, the horrifying scope of the methodical executions and wide-ranging efforts, wide-ranging effects that they have. The other day, Israel occupation forces detonated a robot rigged with tons of explosives in the heart of a densely populated neighborhood in eastern Gaza City, killing even more people, as if they haven't done enough devastation. They're continuing. And what Israel does not want is for Christians and politically conservative anti-war protesters to continue naming them and their crimes against humanity and against the people of Gaza in their ever-expanding appetite for taking on more and more territory. As you know, the Greater Israel Project is much bigger than just Gaza, and they want to try to dominate huge swaths of Syria, as well as on the southern side, huge swaths of Egypt. And they want to continue to increase and expand that border. And so what they're trying to do is place a camouflage out there in the form of anti-Semitism against any Israeli aggression policies that anybody says. But how expansive is it? And the question is answered pretty methodically in that they also consider Christians, because they believe in the deity of Christ, to be anti-Semitic, because the Jews were instrumental in making sure that he was crucified. And so how far does they go? This guy here is saying that anybody who's against any Israeli on any particular issue in any place ought to be considered an anti-Semite, labeled that way, and placed in jail or separated from society or given some sort of yellow star that would go on our shoulder to prove to everybody that we're not an Israeli hater. So I guess what we'll see under the new regime is that every American that is pro or that continues to support the mainstream media narrative will have an Israeli flag in their front lawn along with their American flag. It's an atrocity, And unfortunately, Trump's going along with it. Obviously, the Jews have a tremendous amount of power in D.C. because of the blackmail and extortion game that they've been executing for so long, and that Trump and Bondi refused, and Patel refused to expose.
Yes, Henry Mackhouse published a piece that they have blackmail on Trump for sexually abusing young girls. It's really horrific to contemplate, but it appears to have been a matter of a lawsuit, that there are affidavits and evidence to support it. Profoundly disturbing. And of course, the Greater Israel Project, taking Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates, includes a chunk of Egypt, virtually all of Saudi Arabia, all Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, even parts of Iraq. So that's their ambition. They now have Israeli forces in Syria, and they are not going to remove them. This is permanent. Paul, would you like to add any thoughts?
Well, I'm just amazed at how psychopathic behavior can be masked over by putting these different labels on it and then accusing people who oppose anything around the truth or put that out in any way. Again, they're labeled in such a way that then could be some action taken against them. Again, red going up.
We'll be back and back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
So, Brian,
well, I guess Jim didn't come back on the air, so I guess we probably ought to fill up some dead space here. Jim is probably on his way back, and we know that we're live. Yes, Paul, you were just going to ask me a question.
well, I was going to say that I heard the blank space, and I was just wondering if we're still on right now. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I got it.
Yeah, we are. Go right ahead.
Okay, well, Jim, first of all, thank you for having me on, and Brian, nice to meet you. And what we'll do is, in this period of time, go over not only the Lahaina fire, which was very devastating, but also look at LA fire. And we are been monitoring also 47 other fires that happened throughout the United States. And so I'll go through and talk about all of these different incidences. And what is behind those incidences, I think, is very important. So in this, we'll start to look, first of all, about the communities themselves and the impact this has had, but also in terms of why would these areas be targeted for this type of destruction. And look at the pre-fire conditions, and then the weather that was, looks like it was engineered, and then the fire cause and spread that was just incredibly fast, and the many anomalies that were left in the footprints. And when we start to look at the footprints of the fires, we can start to then get a better understanding of what was really behind the incidents themselves. So here in Maui, we had 5 fires happen on August 8th, 2023. The main one here was in Lahaina, and it again covered a significant area. For us, it was 2,170 acres, but it resulted in 104 deaths. And in LA, so you can see the area that it encompassed, and this was the area where it was fairly heavily populated that was destroyed. And also, when we start to look at what happened in LA, there were over 17,000 structures destroyed, and there were 37,000 acres and 29 deaths that resulted. But so again, the destruction was fairly significant. But most importantly, what's happened is the aftermath. And right now, here in Lahaina, after over a year and a half, people are still traumatized and still in the process of recovery. It really is something to have all of a sudden everything that you worked for, all of your possessions, even family members, no longer there. Just in one evening that happened. And same with LA, the level of destruction has resulted in over 180,000 people being displaced. And as we start to look at what the areas in the communities themselves, Lahaina was really our cultural epicenter. It was where the Hawaiian Kingdom had former foothold, and also it was the small business center for Maui. It was the main income producer, this little area in Lahaina. And people were well established there. They weren't moving, they weren't going anywhere. And also militarily, it's very important strategically. We have a lot of satellite stuff that happens up on Haleakala. We have one of the most advanced computers here in Kihei also. So it's a military stronghold also. And as you start to compare that also to what happened then in LA, Los Angeles, again, it was a very well-established communities, especially Palisades and Eaton. And those communities weren't moving, they weren't going anywhere. They've been there for generations, and they really can't afford going anywhere else. So how do you go about displacing this population that, again, where you have just in that area in Southern California, it is the highest concentration of military contractors and military information that's going on, that's being developed, as well as AI. So it strategically is very important. It's the 5th largest economy in the world in California. So again, so how do you then create something that would result in a smart city? And that's what was the plans that was happening in Lahaina. Just a month prior, Governor Green was at the United Nations bragging about how he's going to convert especially Maui, into smart cities. And then we have also smart city plans for 2028, especially coinciding with the Olympics for Los Angeles. So as you look at also many of the other areas that were targeted for these incidences had the same type of plans for smart cities and development. Now, one very interesting thing that happened prior to the fire was also that we had a heavy rains that occurred in Lahaina, again, December and February. And then when it happened in August, we had a drought. So we had heavy growth, and then that growth became a tinderbox, and so it was very dry, light grass. It would ignite very quickly and spread quickly, but there wasn't much of a fuel load there, as you can see by the grass here. And also, when you compare that to Los Angeles, look at the heavy rains that happened then 11 months prior, starting in December and February, and then goes through March of 2024. And then when 2025 hit, there was high brush growth, and also then it was a tinderbox, and it was extremely dry. And it, again, fire breaks in both areas were promised, and they were not maintained. So again, it made it very vulnerable. If you look at just the fire alerts that were happening in California compared to where it normally is average, you can see how the fire probability was greatly increased. Now, there were also a lot of, in LA, there were a lot of, because of this, and because of taking the budget out, from $17 million prior to, a lot of the different insurance companies were bailing. So you can see just all of these on the left that had done, but also that summer before, State Farm cut 72,000 homes and apartment policies. So again, it just made it so that it was very vulnerable then for the residents in terms of recovery and not having the insurance. So let's go look at the driver of a fire. I think these are very important when we start to look then at how the fire spread and how the fire spread so rapidly in the different areas. And it's a pattern that also exists in these 47 other fires in the United States that we've been looking at. And these were all urban fires. And we start to look at then the main driver of the fire, the winds. What we had on the 7th and 8th was then this Hurricane Dora, was some 650 miles to the southwest of Lahaina. And we had 700 miles to the north, a high pressure system. Now, what the main story is claiming is that these rapidly moving, and they were diverting apart these high and low pressure systems, created then a inversion on the West Mountains that created these winds that were sustained for 12 hours. And if you just look at things very rationally and objectively, that those winds should have been strong, if that were the case, only for about an hour, maximum. But yet it remained stationary for 12 hours. And then we start to look at, okay, what would possibly create that? And certainly engineered weather would be able to create that type of condition and situation. And so let's look at, for example, what happened starting on the 3rd. You see this big blob of particulate matter that is going off the coast of California. And notice how it's tracking along with Dora right here. Now, these big blob, by the time it hit it on the 7th, people there, our residents, saw this huge white silvery wall come over the island. We have never seen anything like that. People were making notes and taking photographs of this haze that just encompassed the entire island. And you can see, again, by the 8th, it was totally immersed in this particulate matter that had been tracking, way away, some 600 miles away from Hurricane Dora, but tracked along with it, and hit the island just it was immersed on the 8th, where it was the highest concentration. So again, when you look at weather engineering, this is one of the instruments that are fairly consistently being used, that there is this type of particulate matter that creates these intense winds. And as you can see here in this video, and let me just, whoops. Let me just make sure that, okay. So you can see the intense winds coming from the fire. This was taken by a mother who had 2 young children, and they were able to escape okay. But look at the firemen trying to it was impossible to really fight this blaze with these swirling winds that occurred. Now, there was a lot of different estimates in terms of the actual wind speed, anywhere from 40 to 80 miles an hour. But one of the things that was very peculiar about these winds is that they were also swirling. And again, for conditions that we normally have, this does not normally happen. Also, with that swirling wind, we had a lot of wind tornadoes, or wind spouts, or firenadoes, as some people call them when they're in the fire zone itself. And you can see here, let me just get this going again. So you can see here that, again, these wind tornadoes were all over the place. We do have them occasionally, but not to this extent. And they were just all over the place, showing that the wind conditions, again, were nowhere near normal as to what normally would occur. And again, when we go look at the LA fire, weeks prior to the fire, there was heavy chemtrails, very heavy, that created a lot of particulate matter, not only in the atmosphere itself, but also that had landed. So, and as you can see here, and then right before, the day before, there were these strange also sprayings that occurred, these strange chemtrails that happened. And again, one of the mechanisms that can be utilized in weather engineering is utilizing plasma type energy, as well as, using the ionosphere to create these columns that then takes this particulate matter, and that can be utilized then to be energized and create these winds. That would be stationary, which again accounts for what happened in Lahaina when you start to look at engineered weather. And so the same type of thing happened here when we do look at the Vantusky, like we did over for the Lahaina fire. These are satellite imagery that, again, takes in the particulate matter that occurs. And you can see here, I'll just speed it up in terms of what happened right prior to. And as we get to the 7th, you can see heavy particulate matter that was being sprayed right before the fire, again, with this satellite that measures that type of particulate matter. So again, when you start to consider the weather and the anomalies. Now, another strange anomaly that occurred was that in Lahaina, the winds were very strong and concentrated also, but also in upcountry, which was about 40 miles away. These two areas had heavy, heavy winds, but then other areas throughout Maui were calm. So again, the only thing that could really take that into account is some type of weather engineering where the winds were very swirling. They would change direction at times, but again, they were the main driver of the fire, as you showed in those other videos. So let's Jim or Brian, do you have any questions about the weather and weather engineering? Because again, this is a very common theme. You'll see a lot of these heavy winds, and right prior to, you see a lot of particulate matter that's being sprayed.
Paul, I think you're doing a superlative job here, and I infer the drought in California was also weather warfare to set up the conditions where the fire would spread very fast and be incapable of being controlled. So I think you're seeing weather warfare in multiple different ways here. Brian, your thoughts?
Well, I'd be curious as to what type of particulate this might have been. Is there any research or any?
Well, we know that chemtrails are dropping particles of aluminum, strontium, and barium that actually serve as incendiaries. The accelerants, if they are ignited, and it's been, the Pacific Northwest had been bombarded by all these chemtrails endlessly. So, and the U.S. Air Force has to know. In fact, it appears the U.S. Air Force is actually performing the chemtrail operations. So this is just disgusting beyond belief that the government is going to participate in a land destruction, a land grab on behalf of wealthy realtors. I'm not quite clear how the government itself is supposed to benefit here. But you have these luxurious, really valuable properties that have long-time landowners and families. They're not disposed to move, whether it's Lahaina or it's in Pacific Palisades. So they simply engineer a disaster to steal it from them. And, they have not granted permits to rebuild in Pacific Palisades, and they've obviously delayed in Lahaina, and I'm sure Paul's going to address this as well, because they have no intention of allowing the residents to reclaim their land. It is disgusting beyond words. Paul.
Well, again, just in terms of the particulate matter, we did have just one sample that was taken, and with that analysis, it looked like thermite in many ways. It had this similar composition. And we have over 50 samples that we'd like to get analyzed. And we also have samples for the LA fire. But again, the money is required to do that is beyond our scope at this point in time. So, if people are so inclined, we certainly could use some help and you can go to our website, MauiCommunityInvestigation.com. And, if you could help us out there, we'd be able to then get more of these samples analyzed. It is something that in terms of when you look at footprints of the weather and you look at the pattern that occurs, you start to see the playbook. When you look at the communities also, you start to see that, well, there's similarities in terms of their plans for those regions. Also, when you look at how many urban areas have been attacked as of late, I mean, it encompasses just the 47 different fires that we've looked at throughout the United States that have similar footprints. That's over 10 million acres that was destroyed, and 365 people lost their lives. But what's really amazing is the aftermath in terms of how they are doing this disaster capitalism. Just in LA alone, we're looking at anywhere between 250 to $280 billion in terms of recovery. So those companies that are owned by BlackRock and other groups or seem to be profiting quite a bit. And again, when you start to look at the technology that's being utilized, again, it's utilizing the energy within the atmosphere itself. So it's technology that is being utilized, and you have certainly footprints of plasma energy that will go into also. So let's continue. When we look at how the storyline is for most of these fires is that they blame a down power line. Certainly in the Eaton fire, that's what's happened, but here in Lahaina the storyline that they have crafted and that they keep on reinforcing, and anything that goes against that storyline is either eliminated, suppressed, or destroyed. So this is the type of dynamic in terms of how they create then a storyline that seems to be somewhat feasible. So the storyline here in Lahaina was that there was a 6:30 fire that started. You can see a down power line here, and that created a small brush fire. But that brush fire was contained fairly early on, but then later on at 3 o'clock, 2:55, the fire reignited. And this time, it just took off like crazy. Even though there was rapid fire response, what happened is it went down this little gully here, and it just barreled down here. It jumped the highway. And then, as you can see here along the highway, you can see the flames going as it started to interface with the urban areas. Now, as there's one area that we're going to go back to later on when we start to go into the vehicles, but you can see the path here of the fire, and this is where the interface happened that then swept through all of Lahaina in that area. But we'll go here a little later on, right where this blue line is here, that circle. We're going to show this little spot here at a later time when we start looking at vehicles also as part of some of the anomalies. So, I mean, and as the fire just raged, it was really super intense, as you can see by this. This was taken by a person that we interviewed, and he survived with another person in his vehicle. But I must say that it was an inferno that is difficult to describe in words, especially when I start to do all these different interviews that we did with people who were victim of this fire. And again, it's been devastating for so many people to lose everything that they've worked for, their businesses that they've worked for all their lives, totally destroyed. And again, the recovery is taking a long time in this process. And same with the LA fire. Excuse me. Again, there was a level of intensity that happened. Again, you can see how it just barreled down these different canyons and valleys. And it was really an incredible inferno that occurred. And the thing is, it's amazing that usually when you have the fires would go and come from these canyons, there would be certainly a rapid spread because of the wind that was being generated. But then when you look at, again, how it kept on that same pace as it went out to the alluvial plain, where the wind should have been dissipated out a lot more, the intensity just kept on going. And people saw just one row after the other being destroyed. And some people were saying that some of these buildings were burning from within. And again, it just gives some indication that some other technology was being utilized other than a normal fire where you would have shrubs and trees and bushes catch on fire in the process, instead of having it be primarily vehicles, block engines, and also the houses themselves spreading the fire. So again, it's very unique. Now, as you look at the spread here, again, it just came from this area up here, and then it shot down along here in this way, and then traveled along the coastline. But this wind was supposedly going from the mountains to the ocean. So for it to spread out like this, very bizarre. So what we would see then, what we noticed that there were potential arson points here as well as here. And these arson points could easily have been ignited with the smoke screen that was created from the light brush then that was consumed initially. And again, you can see these are the areas where there was potential arson points along here. And again, the coastal destruction, where we had most of the value of that property was right along this narrow coastline. And notice how this whole coastline was destroyed for Lahaina. And again, it didn't make sense when you had the wind just supposedly going in this one direction like that, to have it spread out along the coastline like that. And again, I spent a lot of time in the burn zone before they did the cleanup and was able to get a lot of samples and do a lot of research there with our team. And we discovered a lot of very interesting things. And as we also look at the Palisades fire, again, it's very strange how, again, right along the coastline here, where it was extremely valuable property,
Paul,
that was also destroyed. Yes.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this break. Brilliant stuff, Paul. I'm very impressed. We'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Was it a conspiracy? Did you know that the police in Boston were broadcasting "This is a drill, this is a drill" on bullhorns during the marathon? That the Boston Globe was tweeting that a demonstration bomb would be set off during the marathon for the benefit of bomb squad activities, and that one would be set off in 1 minute in front of the library, which happened as the Globe had announced. Peering through the smoke, you could see bodies with missing arms and legs, but there was no blood. The blood only showed up later and came out of a tube. They used amputee actors and a studio-quality smoke machine. Don't let yourself be played. Check out And Nobody Died in Boston Either. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
If you think for 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us. Good evening.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio.
It is no secret that the so-called mainstream media is best described as controlled propaganda. Countless news stories are either totally ignored or spun with half-truths, and because of this, essential facts and vital information are often compromised. Join Dr. Ott every Friday night on Studio B at 10 p.m. Eastern and learn why The Story Behind the Story was nominated for a Peabody Award in its second year of producing unparalleled broadcasting excellence in 1997. That is, if you really care about learning the truth.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, having watched a fair number of Lahaina videos and dissections, Paul, I think you are doing the best, and I believe your residing in Hawaii gave you a lot of advantages, and I just really like what you're presenting here. Please do continue.
Well, Jim, just to put it in perspective, I mean, our goal and objective when the fire occurred was to really get to listen to our gut, first of all, because many of us felt that this was not a natural fire. And what we did was basically we formed a group. There were 40 of us that got together. And within a short time, other people started sending us all their videos, and we became the repository, our community repository of data and information. We have thousands of videos. We have many, many interviews that we've done. So we, really took that stance. And I encourage other people who are listening to also take a similar stance. And when they see these types of incidences occurring, to get together with other people who are concerned and start gathering data and information. Our goal was to make it so that it wasn't about conspiracy theories or hype or really cover up. It was just putting out the facts and data and let that tell the story. And it was very interesting. When we first started, we had 6 former fire captains and fire chiefs look at the data, the anomalies in particular. And they all said the same thing. This was more than just a natural fire. So again, when we start to just take that information, but what is it? What is the footprint? Again, as we start to look at the data, like we did with the weather just now, and look at the many strange things that were occurring that made no common sense in terms of natural events, again, it starts to give some indication as to what's truly going on. And as we continue along here, we just ended talking about the fire along the coastline. And let's look at what happened again in the fires that happened in Lahaina, in LA, and look along the coastline. They claim that it was embers that were coming off the fire, but how can the canopy of all those trees be perfectly fine? Or there is no brush or light grass, but yet all of these different buildings are totally destroyed. How can it be that if you have cascading embers coming down, that the canopies of these trees are unburnt, but yet as you look, you can just see the level of destruction, especially along the coastline, with all of these trees that are perfectly fine and intact, not even the leaves on the trees. So again, it just raises further questions as to what is truly going on. And when you look along the coast of that whole area of Palisades, again, these houses were built for hurricanes. They were sturdy, strong. There was hardly no types of incendiary type things that could have started these fires along that area, except when you start to look at other mechanisms that are available through our military, through black ops, that are able to do that, especially when you start to utilize the energy within the atmosphere itself and start to use plasma energy. It opens up all of these possibilities as to the actual cause. And as we look at, now let's look at some of the anomalies. Now, one interesting anomaly are the trees. Trees burning from within, all the way down into the root system, but yet the bark is not touched. So you can see this is a picture taken in LA, in the LA fire. And this is Lahaina. We studied 28 of these trees in the burn zone. And we looked at how can it be that the bark is fine on these trees, but yet it goes down, way down into the taproot system is burnt. Now, I saw many trees that were hollowed out like this at the very base, but yet the thin branches at the top and leaves were still intact. So again, this type of thing does not make sense. And some of these were pretty tall that were just hollowed out all the way down deep into the base of the tree itself. So in our research, I dug down. This is one tree after they cut the top of the tree. I went down and looked at how far could I dig into where the taproot was, solid taproot, right? I could go 14 inches where it was just ash. And there's also things that we started to look at, phregulites, which again happens with plasma type energy, with lightning. You'll get these types of fused sand and glass. It'll form this type of rock where you normally would just have sand and light sediment. So again, these are all indications that, again, this is not natural. And if we start to look at, well, how can this be? What is the type of thing that could look at? Well, look at plasma energy and look at what happens with lightning. Now, this here is, let's see if we can get this going here. Well, there's something not going on this one right now for some reason. Whoops.
Yeah, you can
okay.
go. You can go back to the slides and try and hit that one again and start it. It ought to play.
Okay, let me.
Something I just want to throw in. There's a current debate about dues versus nukes on 9/11, at which I'm participating, and I'm pointing out, if you compare the damage to the World Trade Center with what you had in Lahaina or Paradise or Palisades, the destruction pattern is completely different. I don't see any way in which you can claim the same type of causal mechanism that caused Lahaina, Paradise, and Pacific Palisades was responsible for 9/11 in New York. Brian, would you be inclined to agree?
Well, I don't know enough about it. All this technological stuff is outside of my scope of understanding, but I am convinced that they are unnatural. That brings me up to my biggest curiosity about all of this is how does an entity that's planning to execute an operation like this go about setting up the community for this type? I know that in the Palisades fire, Karen Bass, there was leaked a telephone call where she told somebody basically that she was getting out of town and that he ought to get out of town as well. And I think it was a voicemail that was leaked or a copy of a telephone pole. So we know that community leaders know that it's coming. How do you make sure that those community leaders are installed, placed in the proper positions with the proper levels of authority to allow these government agencies to come in there and set this stuff, if it's a government agency, to come in and set it all up? What happens? What are the indicators inside the community that you're going to see? And how do you begin to fight against it when you see sort of a corporate takeover of your local county government?
Well, again, I think that what happened in Lahaina is a good example with the police chief, Pelletier. He actually sent in people. Let's see. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. We can hear you fine, Paul.
Okay. So what happened here in Lahaina was that we have a police chief that came in. He was the same one that was involved with the Las Vegas shooting. And they hired him. Again, there was a lot happening with the police commission in order for that to happen. I was on the charter commission at the time for our community. And again, it really did create a lot of stir in terms of our community, in terms of what we were looking for, and in terms of police chief. But what happened was that when the fire actually happened, he actually destroyed forensic evidence around the bodies and wouldn't allow forensic data to be taken in terms of autopsies. And I'll show you the bodies in a little bit. Again, can you see the screen okay that I'm...
Not yet. Slides? You got to return to screen share. You got to return to screen share, Paul.
Okay, let me just... I got knocked off there, and let me...
Sure, just come back.
A little difficulty getting back to screen share here. Escape.
So you're literally telling me that they set the stage by making sure that the sheriff was installed, same one that they could control for Las Vegas, so that he could get in there and do the cleanup job before the community figured out what really happened.
And the mayor in LA as well, yes. And of course, we both know Las Vegas was a complete sham. It was a movie. It wasn't a mass murder.
Yeah, and
soundtrack and all.
Yeah, and okay, so here we go. Can you see the screen now? Are we all set?
Yeah, we're good.
Yep. Okay, great. So let me go back to where I was here. And yes, it is that type of thing. It takes years to prepare. Jim, as you know, with 9/11, I was very much involved with the 9/11 Truth Movement. I was the grassroots coordinator for 911truth.org. I was involved with over 280 grassroots groups that were trying to expose the truth of what happened. And again, it was, very interesting as we tried to get information out, tried to get the truth out, and the suppression that happened. And you know very well that it was prepared several years in advance in terms of what happened for 9/11.
Well, Paul, let me put to you that same question I put to Brian. Would you agree? I mean, you are very familiar with both, that the effects on the World Trade Center look completely different than the effects on Lahaina, Paradise, California, and Pacific Palisades. That's my impression. Your thoughts?
Was that a question for Brian? Or
no, it's for you, Paul, for you.
Okay. I saw that certainly when we start to look at the actual footprints of what occurred with the tower collapse, for example. I think, again, it's different technologies that are being utilized. But when you start to look at the vehicles, for example, they weren't vehicles that were turned upside down or anything like that, but certainly the level of destruction of vehicles was another type of footprint that, again, a normal fire would not have been able to do. But again, it shows that there is some type of technology that's being utilized that is, it looks like black ops type things, which is not part of even our normal military that was being utilized. So again, as we start to look at then these trees,
and of course, microwaves cook from the inside out. They concentrate all the energy at the center, which explains, of course, what's happening to the trees burning from the inside out.
Well, I would say that it's more plasma energy that's being utilized.
All right.
Because plasma will go towards right to the base. So just like you have a lightning rod where the energy will go right down the base if it's grounded. Same with the trees. You can see this tree burning from within as it was grounded down all the way down. That's the type of indication that we had. When I showed the photographs of the trees burnt from within to former fire captains, they said the same thing, that this looks like lightning. And there were some people who had a lot of experience with lightning in the Northwest, and they said this looks like a lightning strike more than anything. And and also a very interesting thing about the trees here in Lahaina, for example, there were a lot of trees that still had leaves on it that were overhanging homes that were totally destroyed.
And
So
yet the
again,
leaves
how
of the
would that
trees
be?
were not. Yes.
What would create that would be going to where the more dense material is. That's why you see plastic and trash cans, plastic trash cans all throughout LA that seem to be untouched, but right next to it were vehicles that were totally destroyed. Again, what would do that? What type of technology, what type of energy would be able to create those types of effects? Plasma seems to be, or some type of wave technology where they are utilizing the energy within the atmosphere and then taking that and directing it in different ways. And there's a lot of different technologies that are pretty amazing that have been developed. And again, as you look at Lahaina, look at all the trees.
Excellent.
While everything is white ash.
Great photo.
Now, this is not normal. This is not normal when you start to see this type of pattern of destruction. And then you go over to LA, same type of thing, where you have all these trees remaining, many with leaves still on it, overhanging these different homes that are reduced to white ash or just burnt rubble. And very interesting, look at how this very highly flammable tree is even hanging over this vehicle that is totally torched.
Yeah, but that doesn't look like the toasted cars in New York.
No, this one's different, but we'll go through some of the vehicles and I think you'll see some of the similarities of the vehicles in New York, some of these other fires. But again, very strange on how this type of combination can happen where you have vehicles burn, but trees don't. Again, here's a vehicle that was taken in LA, this picture, and the vehicle's burning from within. But as you back up and look at, well, wait a minute, look at the tree here. Not even singed, not even smoking, nothing. No sparks are flying around anywhere. Just this tree along this street, which is all pavement, burning from within. Again, it just continues to raise questions. But plasma type energy can do that. It will go to where the more dense materials are, like the engine block right here, that's being destroyed right now in this vehicle. And again, with LA, you can see these the level of destruction of these vehicles.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. But again, look at it's just amazing when you start to look at this is LA vehicles. Again, very similar to what happened in Lahaina. Now I'm going to go back to where the initial start of the fire was for Lahaina. And again, I mentioned that I would go back to this place where this Quonset hut is, right here. Now, I went in there with my partner, Bruce Douglas, and we went in 2 weeks after the fire. And that's when I started, as soon as I started to look at what happened in there, I said, oh my God, this was not a natural fire. This is something where weapons were being utilized on our community. And so right at this one spot, let's look at what I saw. Now this right here, this squiggly line, this is a ramp for wheelchairs. This is what I was greeted by. How can that be? Where this is an open, very large parking lot, asphalt parking lot. And you can see this house, none of the shingles are even touched. Quonset hut, not touched. Look at this, even aerosol can. I actually got the aerosol cans and I could actually utilize the aerosol cans.
Unbelievable.
But look at this.
Yeah.
So how can that be? Especially when you look at this light brush right here. Look at this. Light brush. This is 2 weeks after. So we got in before any type of cleanup happened. And this is the type of thing we were seeing. So again,
that's an unbelievable photograph because of the tire on the back of the car. That's
right.
Unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, here you go. There's the back of the car. Notice the step ladder, everything perfectly fine. There was gas in the gas tank.
Wow.
Huh? So again, when you start to look at all of this light stuff here, again, it was not touched. You know, we got in there before anyone could do anything in terms of moving any of the evidence. But look at this, even this tire has air in it. And again, compare that to the front of this vehicle. And again, that same type of pattern occurred. Again, where you have vehicles in the middle of a driveway, asphalt. Look at the homes, untouched, shrubs, not burnt, but yet look at the destruction of this vehicle. How can that be? Look at this. Look at these vehicles in the middle of a field where all these houses were not burnt. You can see the shrubs and trees were untouched, but yet these two vehicles were toast. They were burnt like the other vehicles. So again, you know, how can that be in terms of any type of spread of fire? Again,
Paul, I think the entire audience is convinced these are unnatural events. I really am the most curious about how you control the community in order to put the right people in position so that they can protect the narrative long term. I mean, how far in advance do you need to go to make sure that a community is set up with the right sheriff, the right detectives, the right people that will keep their mouths shut, the mayor that's under control? How do you do that?
Well, yeah, I think that it was well planned. They had the right people in place. You mentioned the mayor. I question whether the mayor is part of this. In fact, he has been doing the opposite of what you'd expect if this was part of a scam that came. From what I've seen, that he is for the people and fighting. And but again, when you start to look at Governor Green, boy, and look at the policies that they were trying to set policies months prior that any type of disaster that would occur in a historic place like Lahaina wouldn't have to be restored back to the original historical significance that it had. So these were laws that were that Governor Green was putting out. Also, his attorney general hired the main organization that would oversee the research and collection of data. Jim, you love this one. Underwriter Laboratories was hired. Isn't that amazing?
Of course.
The audacity. This is the same organization that was involved with the NIST report and the collapse. And they came up, they were the main backbone of the theory of pancake theory. Because what they did is they fabricated data on how these steel columns collapsed.
Yes.
Totally made up stuff. And that is they put that out as the NIST report to make it seem like these tower collapse were something that was natural, that never happened before or never happened after, according to their pancake theory. So this is the type of cover-up that we're looking at, where they come up with something that seems to be somewhat logical, that it was a restart of a down power line that spread rapidly because of these intense winds that was created by a high and low pressure system some 700 miles away. and that it created these fixed stationary winds that were not natural for that type of event of these pressure systems moving rapidly.
Yeah, Paul, we're approaching the break now. Normally, I'd open the lines for callers. How much time do you need to finish your presentation? Because I want to give that to you.
Let me give me another 10 minutes. Max.
Sure, do it. And then when Paul concludes, I will open the line for callers. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so as you can see here, let's go through some of the vehicles. Now, I wanted to take some time also to show you bodies. And I'm going to start with, so viewers who can see these the videos that we have in the slides, I just caution you because some of them are pretty grueling. But let's start with this cat, for example. Now, this was taken that morning after the fire.
No. And it's still standing. Notice it's still standing. It's turned to charcoal, but it's still standing.
And there's hair on the
Paul.
Also that was untouched on the cat.
Paul, stand by. Stand by. We're hitting the break. We'll pick it up, Paul. This is just wonderful. Right after the break. Stand by.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Management would like to take a moment to thank the listeners and hosts for all their support that has made Revolution Radio one of the biggest platforms for free speech in an ever-growing dark world of censorship. Unfortunately, this platform for free speech has never been free. We need the support of the people. It is the people like you, yes, you, that keeps the station in the front lines of the battle against tyranny and oppression. Please help support Revolution Radio so free speech will not be silenced in a world that seems to be going deaf to the real truth. With your support, we will be able to become an even bigger pillar of light in a dark world.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Revolution Radio.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
Even the government admits that 9/11 was a conspiracy. But did you know that it was an inside job? That Osama had nothing to do with it? That the Twin Towers were blown apart by a sophisticated arrangement of mini or micro nukes? That Building 7 collapsed 7 hours later because of explosives planted in the building? Barry Jennings was there. He heard them go off and felt himself stepping over dead people. The U.S. Geological Survey conducted studies of dust gathered from 35 locations in Lower Manhattan and found elements that would not have been there had this not been a nuclear event. Ironically, that means the government's own evidence contradicts the government's official position. 9/11 was brought to us compliments of the CIA, the neocons in the Department of Defense, and the Mossad. Don't let yourself be played. Read America Nuked on 9/11. Available at moonrockbooks.com. That's moonrockbooks.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Killed while on its feet.
Well, again, look at this toad, and you can see that it was frozen in mid-jump. And again, when we took this sample of this and we tried to look at the organs within the shell of this body was dust. So again, what would create that? That is not a normal fire, especially when we look at former fire captains and fire chiefs. They said, this does not happen.
I think what we're talking about is the extraction of all water. Remember, most of our bodies are like 85, 89% water. I think if you could somehow instantly extract the water, this is the sort of thing you have left. It's something like that, Paul.
So let's go a little bit more and then look at the bodies.
Yeah.
So here is a body has exudite. You see all
charcoal. Yep.
Just again reduced to ash.
Yes.
It looked like when we looked at the bone marrow of this, it looked like it was burnt from within.
Yeah.
Again, it looked more like microwave that happened with this body. And the thing that is amazing is look at the hair on the head.
Yeah.
There. Just like with the cat. And we had dogs also that had still hair that was not touched, but yet again, same things where they were in mid-stride.
Brian, you want to chime in on these bodies, Brian?
Murder. That's all I've got to say about it. That's murder. That's a pure psychopath that would utilize a technology like that against human beings. Pure psychopath. So I hope these people get what they signed up for.
Give us more bodies, Paul. Go ahead. Keep going.
So here's another body again with exudite, but the whole side has been of this body has been just.
Yeah, but not all of the body. That's very curious.
Yeah. So again, it was like flashed on one side.
Yeah.
And again, with some of these bodies, but the hair is still on the head.
Yeah.
Is fine. But again, it was usually bodies go limp, and this body did not go limp. So again, when we start to then go through all of these different pieces, it starts to, let me just stop the share here. Again, it just starts to raise a lot of questions as to who could possibly be behind this criminal activity. And certainly we've been digging and looking. When we start to see, though, Underwriter Laboratories involved with being the main repository of data, when we see our chief of police, who we have, for example, there was a company that was involved with recovering bodies. And what happened was this guy was looking at having it done properly. Instead, what happened, Pelletier took his 40 close associates, sent them out there to collect bodies, and as they did, they destroyed the forensic data and information for those bodies.
Yeah, because they'd crumble. I mean, they just turned to ash, without any shape or form. So that was a bad idea. And yet you're saying you thought he was a good guy?
No. I'm not. I'm saying the person who was in charge of recovering bodies and also transporting them to the morgue. There was a contract with this company to do that. And what happened was when he reprimanded the police about proper procedure for maintaining forensic data and information, he was reprimanded by Pelletier and then fired.
That's not good. That tells me Pelletier was in on it.
Yeah. So not only that, but also he was in charge. He was also the coroner for the chief of police was also the coroner for certainly conflict of interest there.
Yes.
But again, what happened was that they were just allowed to focus in on the DNA material to do body identifications. And instead, they weren't really allowed to look at, like, for example, some of these bodies had blunt trauma prior to their death.
Interesting.
And there were also reports of fireballs that were used as incendiary type devices also, and we have some eyewitnesses that also we have documentation on.
Now, did those who went out to collect the bodies and destroyed them in the process take photographic records of the bodies in place before they picked them up to destroy them?
Certainly, there was certainly some missing, and we put out 21 FOIA requests to try to get some specific data and information. And the police department around the bodies and stuff like that wouldn't even respond to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is the type of dynamic that we're facing in terms of trying to get some.
Well, you can see that.
Data.
You can see how extensive was the corruption in the plot. I'm opening the call to 608-957-8727. 608-957-8727. Brian, your thoughts. Brian, your thoughts. Brian, can't you hear me? Brian, I'm asking. Well, I'm asking for your. I'm asking for your thoughts about the bodies, the collection, and all.
No, well, they obviously had to have control mechanisms set up in advance to make sure that this information was collected in a way that they could control it. It doesn't surprise me. It's an advanced operation. It's obviously planned a long time in advance. And so you've got to make sure that you infiltrate the local community groups and the local county government and set up the right people in the right place that you can be sure to control. I'm sure those people are rewarded greatly for their participation.
Now, certainly in terms of the level of involvement and participation, again, I think that some of our people from our local governance, what they're doing right now in terms of the recovery is Mayor Bisson has made some very strong moves so that all the residents who were to the mountainside of Front Street, which is this narrow street that went along the coastline, all those houses can be now restored to their original footprint and also utilizing its original type of designs so that you can start to get some of the historic value back to Lahaina.
In Pacific Palisades, Paul, they have only issued like 4 rebuilding permits. They have no intention of allowing people to rebuild. They want to seize it.
Well, I think that again is part of possibly the plan. It certainly seems that way in many incidences, but I think again our mayor has stepped in so that people now are in the process of recovering. But to tell you, for example, like FEMA, FEMA is a good example of how these things get orchestrated in disaster capitalism, where they have 7 major contractors that they utilize to do the recovery, to do the debris removal, which is very costly, and identify the debris sites and stuff like that. So FEMA gets involved with all of this. And really, the main objective of FEMA is to protect the existing governance and to keep that so that it remains stable.
Yeah.
It's not about disaster response.
Well, they've been running a lot of phony stage shootings around the country too. I've documented that in spades and published books about a bunch of them. And Brian has done great research on any number with brilliant effects. So FEMA is a disaster. It's it's supposed to be the disaster management, but it's a political entity, just as you're saying.
And so what they did, for example, in terms of trying to gentrify Maui, was that they came in and all of a sudden places that normally would be about $2,000 a month, all of a sudden were being rented for $10,000 a month.
Yeah.
So what they did is they affected the entire economy in terms of rentals and people being able to actually afford living here. Now, because of that, and again, it's been over a year and a half, a lot of people have left because the rents and the cost of living here has skyrocketed.
Right.
Since FEMA got involved with all of
this. So it's going to become an enclave for the elites, for the wealthy, for the rich and powerful. Hawaii is going to be their domain. No doubt.
So it seems like Maui has been targeted. Certainly we have a lot of celebrities that are making this their home right now. Oprah Winfrey is a good example, and Larry Ellison and all of these different people who are Jeff Bezos. So they're all buying up large tracts of lands, and
no doubt at fire sale prices.
So again, it is it really is upsetting to see what's happening to our community. Especially when we look at the money going in even to our local politics. So they have spent, for example, I'm involved with electing representatives, especially for the county council, that serve the people and the environment. Having the right legislatures in a local government is extremely important. So what they did this last election, I mean, we had our, with our fundraiser, we were able to do $42,000. Well, what they did in response, so that they could get their people in, they spent over $800,000. So how can local communities really start to get the right representatives in there when they just put out lies but they repeat it and they have so much control of the airwaves and that affects the collective consciousness that they did get one person in that gave them the majority, and now we're seeing the results of that but this is the money game going on. It's not only in terms of disaster capitalism, but it's also about control of local governance, especially legislation.
Paul, repeat that. They got one in. Was that the bad guys got one in or the good?
No, the bad guys got one in. And because we had the majority for since 2018. And
wow.
We were able to pass 19 charter amendments, which the charter is the local county's constitution.
Yeah.
It's how things are wired. It's how things get distributed. It's
right.
Where the money goes. So again, having control of that gives them control of the development and evolution of a local area. So again, for those who are listening, I encourage you to get involved in terms of looking at local governance. When you start to go on a state, the federal level, it's a whole other ballgame. But where we have a level of control and influence is on a county level. And I think it's very important to look at that. And I've written several books on this process also. The latest one is Reclaim Paradise and Common Sense. So you can get that on our website. We have on MauiCommunityInvestigation.com. And if people really want to look more deeply into the different information that I shared just here briefly, you can go there. We have significant videos on each of the things. For the trees, we have a whole thing on that. For the bodies, we have another video on that. For the vehicles, for the weather, so we go into depth into how these types of things can be engineered and manipulated, and especially what are the footprints. The footprints can be seen as the anomalies, and just as a tracker, can look at the footprints of an animal and they can tell its species and tell its size and weight. We can also then look at the footprints that happens through these anomalies. And I encourage other people who've been gathering data also. We've been, like I said, there are 47 major US urban fires that we looked at that encompasses over 10 million acres. And again, when we start to then do an analysis of that, if there are people who've been gathering data, please contact us. Again, you can get us through MauiCommunityInvestigation.com.
How many of the 47 appear to have unnatural origin?
All of them.
All 47. Wow.
You know, is this natural or not natural?
Yeah.
So there's 365 deaths right there, you know, but with this type of attack. So again, I think for us, especially, you know, with my background involvement with 9/11, and prior to that, I was involved on the National Spill Response Team, where I would be involved with. They had 3 consultants that would be responding to major oil spills. And I was one of the 3. So I got to get involved in looking at disasters and doing analysis and research. And so all of that, you know, with my background in engineering, and we have a great team. We have people, former NASA people, who've been involved with some of this technology, who really are shedding a lot of light as to what is occurring, not only here, but not only in the United States, but globally. I mean, it's amazing when you start to gather all of these incidences that have to do with some type of engineering with the weather, with a number of tornadoes, hurricanes, floods. All these things can be engineered.
Paul, do you have
the technology?
Paul, in the 47, do you have any bodies that resemble those from Lahaina?
No, we've been having, but that's why we want to connect more with people who've been involved with doing research in those areas.
But there should be, would you not agree? There should be bodies like that cat, those bodies that are just charcoal. Look at the cat. It was instantaneous death. I mean, it was just decimated. It's still walking. I mean, this is amazing.
Yeah, I know. So this is the type of data that we're able to gather, especially, you know, that's why I think it's very important for all the communities to be consciously aware that as they gather data and information and share it, that we can start to work collaboratively together to really start to say, enough, we have to stop this destruction that's happening. It's out of control. It looks like black ops type technologies certainly that you know, are using different types of wave technologies.
Well, I'm very, very impressed by your research. Brian, I'd like your reflections on the whole of it.
Well, there's obviously high technology that's being used here, and my question is, has it only been used here in the United States? Is it something that is this a global phenomenon, or is this can set up and control a particular geographical area?
Brian, it is global. Again, when you start to look at some of the engineered events, we have people who are looking at major weather events that create these level of catastrophes. And again, you can see the heavy spraying of particulate matter that happens, you know, as one of the footprints of this type of technology that's being utilized. And again, they're able to create winds, steer winds, to create, you know, drought conditions, heavy rains. If they wanted to, they could have had heavy rains happen the day of the fire in LA. I mean, that's how advanced the technology is.
I agree.
But notice how they had heavy rains 11 months prior, and then drought, total drought. And then again, that created a tinderbox, the right conditions. And as you mentioned, with all the spraying, especially utilizing, you know, nanotechnology and how nanotechnology can actually be smart and be, you know, programmed to do specific things. Again, some of the technologies that go way beyond what most of us are consciously aware of. But when you start to see the footprints of some of this technology, then you start to say, okay,
Paul,
this is not natural, and we are being attacked at this point in time. And I think we have to become more consciously aware of that.
Oh, Paul, you've done a great job. Now look, it seems to me these smart cities are outdoor prisons. They're trying to make the population accept the idea of imprisoning themselves as though it were a good idea, that they're being smart when they're being played for fools, for suckers, for saps. It is disgusting. Your thoughts?
Well, certainly in terms of if you look at then how people are being removed from their basically urban areas and put more into concentrated living conditions, it certainly then goes into the whole model of smart cities. And again, when you start to look at the frequencies and energies that are being utilized within those smart cities and the ability and capacity to control things, again, it is, like you were saying, Jim, it can be a prison. But that's why we have to be more consciously aware of what's going on and not being duped by mainstream media or some type of, distractions that are occurring. And there's a lot of distractions right now. And I think that's also part of the plan, so that this whole other main type of movement can continue and attack people and have disaster capitalism be so profitable for some of these companies involved with that. So
Right.
Again, I mean, I just look at the amount of displacement, 180,000 people just in LA itself. I look at what happened here in Lahaina in terms of the trauma and devastation. People still don't want to talk about it, and I know that there are a lot of people who have some very, very telling, important data, but they're afraid to come out and even, so this is what we're facing. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of concerns, and also there's a lot of like, I don't want to hear this. This is conspiracy stuff. Because I think in our belief systems, a lot of people can't even imagine that this type of crime could be happening to our own citizens here in the United States, as well as globally. And it goes way beyond what we're good people, and a lot of people would not harm even, an animal at all. And yet to see this type of thing, for them to go and cross the Rubicon over to, oh my God, there are these psychopaths who are creating this level of destruction and harm to us, and that we have to get together collaboratively and do something about this. And I think that we can do a lot. You go to our website, MauiCommunityInvestigation.com, and we have a listing of all the federal government agencies where you can write to and say that we need to have an open, public, transparent investigation and hearing. Not like the Warren Commission or 9/11 Commission, but to have it so that we have objective, clear scientists, forensic experts, people who are in the community itself, and utilize that data and information to get down to the bottom of what's truly happening and then prosecute people. So that is what we're going toward, to have that type of thing. We're looking at common law. We certainly have been trying to get data and information through FOIA requests, and we just get a lot of BS and stuff that is incomplete. For example, I ask about the vehicles and the burnt vehicles, and what do you gather on that? It says, well, the only data we have is how many vehicles we removed from the burn zone. When I asked about the trees, about burning trees from within, the response was, oh, the only data that we gathered was how many trees we cut down and how many trees survived. You see, so this is, they will avoid getting anything data that's controversial to their main storyline. And this is part of the problem. That's why we need the community to get involved in doing research and gathering data and information. And again, we have a Dropbox at our at MauiCommunityInvestigation.com. If people have relevant data and information for their area, please send it to us. And again, we'd love to collaborate. I think we need that level of collaboration at this point in time. We're at a point right now where the incidences are increasing at an ever rapid rate. I think that Lahaina was just another experiment, but LA was like Lahaina 2.0. And again, we'll continue, I think, to keep on seeing these types of incidences, unnatural incidences, as long as we do not do anything.
Brian,
and, that's a big concern.
Brian, I'd like your thoughts overall.
Well, we're in the business of distributing red pills to anybody who's willing to tune in to any of our station. And the red pill obviously is the wake up, begin thinking with your mind, take a look at the images and introduce yourself to some of the more advanced information. I like the organization Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. I think your organization mirrors that in style, except maybe without necessarily the scientific platform. I would like to see fire marshals, ex-fire marshals make statements about this kind of stuff because they understand these things much better than we do. As for the smart city concept, I don't necessarily see it as a prison. I see it sort of as the opposite of a prison. I see that as going to be, as the smart cities, once they get set up, are going to be the places that are so secure that they can put all the criminals and still create a small sort of utopia in terms of, hey, we're going to make sure this place is safe, that nobody's got a gun, that you guys are all going to be fine, and as long as you come along nice and well and do your job for the government, we're going to have you.
Except